Often the conversation around biodiversity, land, and development leads back to the topic of ownership and property rights. But author, entomologist, ecologist, and conservationist Doug Tallamy has created a movement to circumvent that. What if property owners reframed their perspective and looked at their plot of land as part of the larger ecosystem? That's where the Homegrown National Park Movement comes into play. Thank you for joining us, Doug.
Well, pleasure to be here, Lisa.
Doug, I'd love if you could break down what exactly the Homegrown National Park concept is.
Well, we do have a biodiversity crisis. It's global, but we'll just focus on this country. We have parks and we have preserves, and they're doing the best they can, but we still have this crisis, so it's not good enough. What we need to do is start to practice conservation outside of parks and preserves. That, of course, is on private property. It's where we live, we work, we play, we shop. So the future of conservation really falls to the private property owner. Problem is they don't know that. They don't understand what the crisis is, how important it is, what their role is, and that's where Homegrown National Park comes in. Our job is to get that information to the people that need to practice it. So we do everything we can think of. We do talks, we do books, we do interviews. We have a lot of information on our website, documentaries, every form of communication we could think of to convince people who own property that they're not exempt from conservation. As a matter of fact, it's totally dependent on their actions in the future. So we're working on it.
What's the best way to get started? It's spring in Michigan. I'm thinking about a little plot in my backyard. What would you recommend to me as a beginner?
Well, I would stop thinking about something that's so ugly we have to hide it in the backyard. Front yard's an option too. We always talk about backyard habitat, but that cuts our conservation area in half. Most people have too much lawn. There are 4 things that every landscape needs to accomplish. It needs to support pollinators, a food web, it needs to sequester carbon, and it needs to manage the watershed, and lawn doesn't do any of those things. So reducing the area we have in lawn is step 1. How you do that? I mean, you can put in a pollinator garden. The easiest thing is to plant a tree and put a bed under that tree, and that reduces the area of lawn around that tree. The tree's gonna grow, so that bed can expand, but, and I would recommend starting slowly. Sometimes I give a talk and people say, "I'm gonna rip out all my lawn." Don't do that, you have to have a plan for it, that becomes a big job. But if you planted 1 tree a year and you did that for 10 years, you've had 10 extra trees in your yard, and it would be very different.
Hmm. I'm curious if you could explain how it would be different for people who've already, established their yards as habitats with native plants. What are some before and afters? What might they see? What how might it change the way that their yard feels?
Well, it would bring life to your yard. So if you don't interact with your yard at all, you may not even notice that, although it's hard to not notice that. The birds would come. What those trees would do would be produce bird food. It would largely produce caterpillars that the birds use to reproduce. So you could have reproducing birds on your yard. It's not just bird feeders. It is bird feeders. It's plants that are the bird feeders, and they feed them all year round. The entire food web would be reconstructed in your yard. Now it depends on how much property you own. And of course, the bigger the better. But if you get your neighbors to do it, then it's twice the size. But that is the benefit. I mean, you'd walk outside, you would hear singing birds. You could see different forms of life. And we've got gray tree frogs that have hopped into our yard, and they sing all kinds of fun little things. But the point is what you're doing is creating connectivity. If you and a bunch of other people do it, then outside of those parks and preserves, it's not no man's land. There is some habitat. And if we do it all over the place, then the parks and preserves are not small and they're not isolated. And that should solve much of the problem.
Within the realm of restoring biodiversity in someone's yard, what would you consider a success?
Yeah, I think the easiest form of success in terms of measuring it is to have a bird actually nest on your property, because they can't do that unless the food they require is there. Nesting bird forages very close to the nest, usually around 50 meters within the nest. So that's your yard. And it takes thousands of caterpillars to get a bird to complete its nest. So you've got to have all those caterpillars in your yard. So if you have, let's say you have a nesting chickadee, that's a real measure of success.
That's amazing. I actually had that experience last spring where there was a bird nest up on my gutter, and we noticed that there were tons of caterpillars because they devoured our dill. And there was like about 11 of them, and one by one, as soon as they got really big, they started disappearing. And we realized it must have been the mama bird. So that's kind of amazing to hear that that is a sign that maybe my yard is a good place for birds.
Or dill.
Yeah. We're obviously really passionate about our watershed at Great Lakes now, and I'm curious to know how native planting might help the waters in our local ecosystem.
Well, again, let's go back to that lawn. We've got 44 million acres of lawn in this country, and much of it is around the Great Lakes region. When you have a storm event, most of that water runs off, and it takes the fertilizer and the pesticides and the herbicides that we put on our lawns with it into the Great Lakes. So getting any kind of planting instead of lawn is going to help the watershed. But if you're going to put plants in your yard, why not do plants that do everything? That help the food web, that support pollinators, that sequester carbon, and that guard that watershed. So all of those things can be accomplished by putting native plants in your yard and reducing the area that's in lawn. Big trees, of course, have big root systems that hold the topsoil. They absorb tons and tons of water, believe it or not, before it even gets to the groundwater. So getting the trees back is a big part of it.
Could you explain how native plants help to sequester carbon or why they're better at sequestering carbon?
Well, I'm not going to claim that they are better.
Okay.
All plants sequester carbon, and bigger trees that are very dense, have very dense cell structure, sequester more carbon. So oaks are the best, at least in this country. But that's not a native non-native thing. That's a size longevity. So the longer the plant lives, the longer that carbon is held. But again, if you're going to sequester carbon, and people are doing this all over the world, they're planting eucalyptus. Well, eucalyptus is great in Australia, but beyond that, it's not supporting anything. So we want to plant the plants that will also support the food web when we're trying to sequester carbon.
What's at stake if we don't partake in restoring biodiversity?
Well, the extreme answer to that is we're going to disappear from this planet, and that means humans. We've got a biodiversity crisis. Most of the species on this planet are declining. If they actually go extinct, that will be a great extinction event, and we'll be one of them because it is species that run the ecosystems that provide the life support that keep us on this planet. It's the most underappreciated aspect of nature. We like nature, but people think it's optional. We can watch it on television. It's not optional. It runs the life support systems that we humans need. We've got 8.4 billion humans on the planet now, and we need more life support, more ecosystem services now than ever before. So every time we degrade an ecosystem, we're getting fewer services. So we've got to turn that around for our own good.
In my yard, I have an established heritage rose that's definitely not a native plant, but it's sentimental to me because my aunt gifted it to me when I moved there. Um, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on gardening with plants like this.
Your rose is not a native rose, and what I think is that's fine. There is room for compromise here. We did a study with chickadees in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and it turned out that if you had 70% of your plant biomass native, you could support a family of chickadees on that property. But that leaves 30% of plants that didn't have to be native. They weren't required to support that chickadee. That's where your rose comes in. That's where your crepe myrtle. You can put anything in your yard as long as it's not invasive and as long as most of the plant biomass in your yard is native.
Hmm. I'd love to know what's making you feel hopeful right now.
Well, we're having this interview, and that's it. It's the interest of the general public that's making me feel hopeful. Since they are the key to the future, they're the solution. The growing interest among people who didn't know anything about this is really heartening. It's I mean, I get a couple talk requests every single day. Can't can't make them, but the interest is skyrocketing. So that's what gives me hope. People are realizing that there are things they can do on their property um, that would be part of the solution, and that empowers them. Then they want to do it again. In the past, we've worried about the planet, but we feel powerless. What can one person do? Well, there's a whole bunch of things one person can do right where they live, and it does make a difference, and you can see that difference. And I see that really motivating people all over the country.
I love that. I think that's a great way to end the interview. Thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
No, you are welcome.
For more information about Doug Tallamy and the Homegrown National Park Movement, check the links in our description on YouTube or in the show notes on your podcast platform. And be sure to check out homegrownnationalpark.org for more details about how to get involved in restoring a little bit of your ecosystem right at home. And to get more stories about the region and the lakes you love, subscribe to our YouTube channel and the Great Lakes Now newsletter. You can find it at greatlakesnow.org.